Okay, hello. My name is Jennifer Lamberts, and again, I'm from the Mary Lyons School. My email is jlamberts@bostonpublicschools.org. I will be discussing investigation 2 called Speed. This is about 5 or 6 sessions or over a week. I would say that this will take you at least a week and a half, and it can even take longer. I wouldn't spend more than 2 weeks on it, but there are really important concepts embedded into this investigation. As you can see, there's 5 main objectives. So in this investigation, students are going to be able to describe speed as the rate of change of position of an object. So they're going to come up with the equation that v, or speed, is equal to distance divided by change in time. And they're going to learn that the slope of the line on the speed graph represents speed, and the steeper the slope represents higher speeds. This is a huge concept both in science and in math. They'll see it on the PARCC test, and they'll also see it on the science MCAS in grade 8. So this is an objective that you really need to hit home. They'll continue to see it in this unit, but this is the investigation that they should be learning it. In this investigation, they'll also be manipulating variables in an equation to solve for different unknowns, which means they'll be able to determine time when they have distance and speed, or they'll be able to determine distance when they have speed and time, or time when they have speed and distance. I would say there needs to be more practice of this skill than there is in the investigation. The students will also conduct experiments to acquire distance and time data to determine the speed. And then they'll use tools to gather the data in math to organize the data. They'll be able to use math to solve problems involving unknown quantities. Now you read this is a technology and engineering strand. It's also going to be found in the math standards. And this is the investigation that students ask, why are we doing math? I already had math again. So it's a great opportunity to have students understand the connection between math and science. But it's also something for the teacher to be aware. In this investigation, make calculators available because my focus is them understanding the concepts rather than learning how to do the simple mathematics. The math is not that hard, but for some of our students, I work in a full inclusion classroom, it is hard and it's challenging, and it means that they don't get to the concepts because they're hung up with the math. So that might be something you want to think about. And then finally, they'll be talking also about average speed. And average speed is the total distance traveled by an object divided by the total time needed to go that distance. So investigation 2 is also broken up into 3 main parts. The first part, who got there first, the main idea of this is that students realize that in order to figure out speed, they need to know time and distance. So they start with a really fun activity that gets them all flustered, but at the same time, it has that emotional response. So the idea is that they understand it and they think about it more. The next part is more practice with just kind of manipulating in math. And in this, with these worksheets, they really figure out what the equation for speed is and what the equation for distance is. It's really exciting when the kids come up with this on their own, and it's much more likely that they're going to remember it if you let them come up with it on their own. It's sometimes difficult to let them struggle, but you can scaffold so they can do it by themselves. And then finally, part 3 is an active investigation where they're going to be determining the relationship between the slope of a ramp and the speed of a car. And they will be collecting data. They'll be collecting time data and distance data to determine the speed, and they'll also have to graph their data. So I have this just like in investigation 1, because I wanted to show you again that you have the preparation and the step-by-step overview. But I also wanted to point out the idea that there are actually 3 readings involved in this investigation. This is a decision you'll have to make. In my class, if I were to assign these readings, not everybody would do them for homework. And if we were to do it in class, it would probably take a whole class period. I sometimes will assign parts of it, but I won't assign the whole reading. I have also found that Sometimes the reading level is above where the students are actually reading at. So before you assign the readings, I would highly recommend you reading them and making sure that they are appropriate for your students. Now, we did not get to talk about assessment in the last last screencast, so I just wanted to kind of show you where you can find that. You can find it in your Teacher's Edition, but you can also find it on FOSS Web. So if you go to the FOSS Web module, you can click on the Assessment Masters, which I've already done, and it will bring you to all of the midsum exams. So midsum exam 1 is right before this, and midsum exam 2 is here. I like to look at the exams before I start the unit so I have an idea of where the students are expected. One of the things I wanted to point out here is that these words, how long, how far, how fast, are really important. I make my students highlight the words every time they see them, and I even have them, if they highlight how long, they have to write time above. If they write how far, they have to write distance. If they write how fast, they have to write speed. And this is helpful for your English language learners also. This number 2 is kind of tricky because they're talking about him going 1 meter per second for 1 minute. So this is the idea that they actually have to convert units. This can be a day in itself, just teaching them how to convert units. Then here, this is all pretty straightforward, but I think because there's so much writing and so many steps that sometimes the students get overloaded and they actually do worse than you would expect it. So I have in the past rewritten this, and I've just had number 3 on 1 page, and I had number 4 on 1 page. I also always make sure to point out the show your math and show your work because the students don't always do this. Number 4 seems pretty simple, but they don't necessarily get the symbol. So this is maybe something you want to explain to them. And then here's your big question. They really need to understand in this investigation that the steeper the slope, the greater the speed. So Carol is going the fastest because her slope is the steepest. You want them to understand that because they're going to see it in PARCC, they're going to see it in MCAS, and they're going to see it on any assessment. So this is a graphing skill that they are taught in this investigation. Okay, let's go back to this. So in the first part of this investigation, the students are given this sheet, and they're asked who goes faster, the car or the truck. And the whole purpose of this first activity is for students to argue with each other, respectfully, of course. But you want them to enter into some discourse. So sometimes the students say that they go the same speed because the car and the truck are going the same distance. Sometimes they say the car goes faster because it's lighter, and the opposite is true. The truck goes faster because it's bigger. This one always kind of throws kids off because sometimes they're saying the car got there first because it had further to go, so it was going faster. And sometimes they say the truck got there first because it only had a little bit to go. Now, it's really important to bring up the idea of the reference point again here. And in this part, I accept any answer as long as they give me reasoning for it. So by the end of this, the main idea is that the students realize that nobody is right because nobody said that they needed to know the time. Or if they said it, that's why. Now they have the time, so we've discovered that you need to actually have the time associated with if you're trying to find the speed. So in this one, I have an arrow pointed here because we assume that kids know how to read these clocks. They don't necessarily know how to read these clocks. So if you want to take that out of the equation, write down the time, okay? So this does kind of throw them off. So this idea is if 2 vehicles are going the same, they start together and they go the same distance, they've arrived at the final position together. This in race 2, the main idea is that if they go this different distances in the same amount of time, the one that goes further is going faster. And then the last one is if vehicles travel for different amounts of time, you need to find out how far they both go in 1 hour.